Get water, little man. Come on out.
Okay. Second down. Call it inches.
Got to leave the ball in Abernathy's hand. There it is. Keep going outside. That's it. There it is.
Touchdown.
Finally got points to the board. Touchdown. Number one. So what's the Abernathy?
All right. Now they got to hold their poise. Got to hold your poise.
So the 8th grader from Casa Elementary School, not only league all-star key player, favorite team the Bills, and he likes DK Metcalf.
Not a bad guy to like.
And I'm sure the coaches, when they look back, they'll talk about the missed tackles and not staying home.
Yes.
You know, that hurt on that play. But that's usually one of the strengths of the Collinwood Cobras.
It sure is. Oh, Atkins couldn't quite get in there. Too much standing around on that offensive line.
So that's huge.
It is huge.
Because now a score by the Cobras and a try for the extra point gives them the game. So Garden Valley's defense has got to come up and play. Antonio Robinson denied him getting in, the left outside linebacker and league all-star. So 3:34 to go. The Garden Valley Falcons, you see it right there, they're up 6-0.
This is exciting, Tim. First inaugural game of in our league at the 12U Division Championship. A division that's been enjoyed by all season long. Great play. I believe we had about 8 teams in this division, Tim.
334.
And the teams played hard. They played well. And the kids had a lot of fun. Yeah, we had 8 teams in this division. Collinwood Cobras, the Glenville Panthers, the Ohio Cardinals, Westside Wolverines, Southside Seahawks, Garden Valley Falcons playing here today, and Pack Youth Bearcats, and the Youngstown Redmen.
So we got first down and 10.
Uh-oh, he's got a convoy, Tim. He's got a convoy.
Whoa! Somebody's making a statement here.
Right, they're in the Garden Valley
Not
territory.
just yet. Don't count us out, they're saying.
And we got a man down. Looks like it's number 11. That's down.
Take a knee.
Keon Taylor is the one that is down. He's the one that made the stop. And it does pick up the first down.
And you can see that sense of urgency now that the Collinwood Cobras has, now that the Garden Valley Falcons finally punched it in. Coach Crutchfield is really urging his guys on to get the ball into the end zone, especially right now. Do it early. Don't wait.
You know, this is twice now in the ball game. The last time it was Garden Valley's advantage, where we had that little delay with the injury and it gave them another shot to get in. This time, Garden Valley got the injury, and you can see the Cobras are huddling up over here. And again, if Ralph was here, I would be asking him on the officials' timeout, you know, are they permitted to do that? I believe they are not, but they weren't. Nobody was looking. So, what do you call that that we always use with the? I didn't see it.
That's it.
That's the famous line.
You can just see the anxiousness of the Collinwood Cobras. They know this is dire straits right now. They're trying to get their first championship in their young career here in Muni football. Might be one of the fastest organizations to get a championship in just their 3rd season, 4th season of their existence.
We're going to talk about a will to run. You're looking at it right there, and making that tackle was number 2, Zeshan, and Jaheim Edwards, number 20, also on the stop.
Yeah, good job by Antonio Robinson right here. Just putting the head down and getting upfield at all means necessary. He even stiff-armed his own man out the way.
2:40 clock runs. Collinwood Cobras looking for the big play. They get a double block. Cleared the way to the outside. Speed, John, speed. That's what that is. All the way down to the 22-yard line. And a first down for the Collinwood Cobras. They're finding something on that right side where they can run outside.
It's something that Coach Crutchfield's had in his arsenal the whole day, Tim. He's just now pulling it out, just giving the ball to one of his main men, his key players, Antonio Robinson, just on the keeper, making sure the ball is secure and just getting it upfield and running to the outside. They give it to the big fella just for a change of pace. He's got to hold on to that ball. No turnovers. And he's able to pick up 5.
2:14 clock runs. John, that play was to give them some room on the right side. I'm telling you right now, they ran left to spread them out.
And to give Robinson a break because he's going to run the football right here. Believe that. Okay, we got a timeout. Collinwood.
Timeout, Collinwood. I think it was a good timeout call here. You're now in scoring position with 1:50 to go. They got to make something happen here.
Well, they're definitely playing with a lot more confidence, Tim. You can see their swag on this drive as Antonio Robinson able to pick up a couple plays, big plays.
Let's go in the huddle and see what the coach has to say.
Guys, y'all know I love y'all, right? Let's go. Y'all right? Let's go. Yo, push the end zone right now. We got KP. Listen, we got Tonio to the right. Tonio better score. And y'all better block. Let's go. Let's go. Direct snap. Direct snap. On the ball. Direct snap.
From Director Michael Curry from the Office of Equal Opportunity. And then if you could come to and join us to the table. Good afternoon, Director Curry.
Good afternoon.
So you have a presentation up. Wasn't sure if you just wanted to start at least introducing yourself. Anything that my colleagues want to hear, and then you could start the presentation.
Of course. Thank you to the Councilwoman. My name is Michael Curry. I am the Interim Director of the Mayor's Office of Equal Opportunity. I took over that role in June of 2021, filling in for Dr. Melissa Burrows, who has moved on. I have been with the Office of Equal Opportunity for the past 15 years, operating first as a compliance officer, then as a compliance manager, and then as assistant director. I have been actively engaged in the work that we do for a very long time. We've had a lot of successes, a lot of things that we've done very well, and some things that we can do better. And that is our goal going forward, is always trying to do the best we can to serve our client contractors, our client workers, and finding ways to engage the City of Cleveland community in the City of Cleveland's contracting.
Thank you, Director Curry. So I know today you're going to give us an update on, data, statistic on minority and female businesses, the process of outreach and strategies for the EOA office, and just potential barriers that you'll be discussing with the Office of Opportunities, and then emerging trends in the business opportunity, in the business opportunity. And I know that Vice Chair Councilwoman Howes and myself did meet with you. Great meeting. Thank you for give us an update. So I'm just really excited about my colleagues learning everything that the Office of Opportunity is working on. So you could begin.
Thank you. So what I have here this afternoon is a brief presentation, a little bit about where we're at, some interesting data that we've collected over the past several years, and some general information on what it is we do and how we do it. So the Office of Equal Opportunity, again, as Councilwoman stated, these were the topics of discussion here for this afternoon, including our reporting, description of our processes, identifying barriers and emerging trends in the type of work that we do. The Mayor's Office of Equal Opportunity is a contractor certification and contract compliance department with the City of Cleveland. OEO was established in 1977, has been a fundamental component of the city's contracting process for 45 years. Our mission is to advance equal economic benefit for all Clevelanders by ensuring compliance with contractor goals and requirements, by providing development and support activity for target groups, and by overall advocacy with a commitment to excellent public service. So those are our fundamental core components of the work that we do.
Director, real quick, can you hold on really quick just in case
course.
my colleagues need some time to get on the
Of course.
presentation? Okay. And then they're good. Okay. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Not a problem. OEO is controlled by 4 ordinances. 3 are our guiding ordinances. Section 12308 establishes the office and the powers of the director. Chapter 187 is our Cleveland Area Business Code. This is the code that provides guidance for the certification of minority, female, and local small businesses. It sets up our subcontracting process in terms of the goals that we establish on our contracts greater than $50,000. It establishes our bid discount and evaluation credit policies to give the city the ability to award contracts to our certified firms. And establishes that element of the office. Chapter 187A is our local producer, local food purchaser, and sustainable business preference code. This is a slight offshoot of Chapter 187, but specifically to those types of businesses. OEO will certify businesses in these directions and will recommend bid discounts and evaluation credits for these businesses. There are not subcontracting goals established for our local producer, food purchaser, and sustainable businesses at this time, but we do still certify them and keep a list of them. And then finally, Chapter 188 is our Fannie M. Lewis Cleveland Resident Employment Law. That law was enacted in 2003 and required that 20% of construction worker hours performed on City of Cleveland contracts would be performed by City of Cleveland residents, and that 4% of that 20% would be performed by low-income residents. In 2019, the Ohio Supreme Court determined that the Fannie Lewis law was in conflict with a state of Ohio law that prevented these sort of local preferences on public improvement contracts. And so the City of Cleveland and the Office of Equal Opportunity have not been able to enforce the Cleveland resident requirement on our public improvement contracts. Those would be those contracts where the City of Cleveland is doing construction on our own property. The OEO does still enforce Chapter 188 obligations on our development contracts. So contracts where the city has a financial investment in the project, but does not actually own the property. So it's where the city has invested development funds in private projects, and we will continue to enforce Chapter 188 on those particular projects. OEO's work falls into 3 major categories. That's the certification of our minority, female, and small businesses, as well as our local producers and our sustainable businesses. OEO has a robust certification process that's designed to ensure that our businesses do qualify and that we've done the necessary background work on them. OEO is also responsible for bid and proposal evaluation when it comes to the use of those certified firms, whether it is verifying that those firms are certified and so are eligible for bid discounts or evaluation credits, as well as if a bidder has demonstrated a good faith effort to subcontract with those firms to meet goals applied to those contracts. And then finally, we focus on contract compliance. So contractors will let us know which subcontractors they intend to use on a project. OEO, over the course of the contract, will verify those subcontractors are indeed used on the contract, that they're being paid in a timely manner, and that they are actively participating on the contract. Oh, and I apologize, I'm way behind in the slides. When it comes to OEO certification, OEO currently has 556 businesses certified. Of that, 215 actually is currently 217. We've added 2 more over the last couple days. Are minority-owned businesses, 300 are female-owned businesses, and 442 of that list are our Cleveland area small businesses. Our businesses can be multi-certified, so they could fall into multiple categories there. It is a single certification application, so a contractor applies once, and whatever categories they fall under, we'll certify them in those categories. We are a little bit below our normal number of certified businesses. We usually run closer to 600. As you can see, we're a little bit under that right now. Our certification process is annual and requires an annual renewal from our contractors, so we do occasionally get a little bit of a low time here after the holidays as contractors are picking back up, but we do expect that number to get closer to 600 in the relatively near future. As I was stating earlier, our Fannie Lewis law was found to be in conflict with a different state law in 2019. As a result, OEO can no longer enforce the resident requirement on our public improvement contracts, and it has significantly impacted the number of Cleveland residents on our public improvement contracts. Just briefly, with historical data that we've collected, OEO collects certified payroll reports for all of these construction contracts in order to monitor compliance. In the 10 years that we've been collecting this information electronically, and all of our information is currently collected electronically, we have collected we have 15.5 million construction worker hours have been recorded by our office. That equals $485 million of gross pay. And when I say that, we've reported that. We've actually collected the information to verify that that number is correct. That's over 3 million minority construction worker hours performed on these projects, coming out to 19.5%, 500,000 female hours, and 700,000 apprentice hours. So this is the result of the data that we're collecting for compliance purposes. This is just some summary data of what we've managed to collect over the past 10 years. To show the impact that the 2019 Supreme Court decision has made on Cleveland resident utilization on city contracts, I have this chart showing that we've seen a significant drop-off in terms of percentages, our utilization of Cleveland residents on our public improvement contracts, falling from 20% in 2019 down to 16% in 2020 and down to 13% in hours recorded to date for 2021. And if we look at the general trend here on the next slide, you can see we've seen a significant drop-off in resident participation in our public improvement contracts. And we believe that's the direct result, obviously, of our inability to enforce Chapter 188 on these contracts. If there is some good news, it is that we continue to enforce it on our development contracts. And while we are still seeing a bit of a negative trend in that regard, the number of residents that we've recorded working on these development contracts is significant. So we've seen a similar trend in terms of a reduction, and we're lower than we'd like to be in terms of the resident participation, but we are still able to enforce on these development contracts, and so we are ensuring that a large number of Cleveland residents are working on these development projects. The same trend on the next slide, you'll see we're still seeing a negative trend, and we're working actively to combat that, but the reality is that we've collected a lot of data, and that data shows what's in front of you here, is that the projects that we've been monitoring on the development side are still, as a whole, running below that 20% number over the past couple of years. With that said, and we are concerned about the future, in terms of closed projects that OEO has finished its monitoring on and has wrapped up the project and has released any outstanding retainage on, in 2021, the average closed project closed by the Office of Equal Opportunity averaged 23% resident participation and 10% low-income participation. So on our projects that are a little bit older, that have had consistent compliance over the past several years, we're still getting to a good final number. I do expect that number to get worse as our enforceability on Chapter 188 goes away, but that's what we were able to show in 2021. As I stated earlier, OEO collects certified payroll reports, and that's where we get this data from, and we do that for both the public improvement and development contracts. While OEO does, and the City of Cleveland in general, have a non-discrimination clause in its contracts, There are no requirements that a contractor must use a set number of minority workers or female workers on a particular project. So while the contractors absolutely cannot engage in discriminatory hiring or employment practices, there is no direct obligation on the contracts indicating that a contractor must indeed use a certain number of minority or female workers on a particular contract. And what we'll see on the next page is the breakdown of the hours by demographic group, by ethnicity group, in the hours that we've collected over the past 5 years. So you can see that we have been able to track the number of African American, Asian American, Caucasian, Hispanic, Native American, and other categories over the past 5 years. And you can see the percentages of those individual categories. We obviously have also collected the wage data for those individual groups, and you'll see that summary there as well. If I break that down in a chart here, you can see how that's shifted over the course of those 5 years. Obviously, the pandemic years of 2020 and 2021, there was significantly less construction work performed that we recorded in those years. And it has had a negative effect on every group in terms of raw hours and raw wages. However, that has impacted our minority workers significantly as well. Moving on to the next page, you'll see the trends in African American worker utilization over the past 5 years after seeing significant growth on city contracts in 2017, 2018, and 2019, significant drop from there in 2020 and 2021. Again, these are raw numbers, not as a percentage, but you can see that the pandemic has had a significant negative impact on City of Cleveland contracts at the very least with all of our groups, but in here, illustrating how that impacts our African American workers. Moving on to the next page, you'll see the same trend with our Hispanic workers on City of Cleveland contracts. Again, solid growth from 2017 through 2019, and then significant downward trends in 2020 and 2021. That same trend is also present in our Caucasian workers. Again, the pandemic has been very hard on construction work generally, and it has had a negative impact in terms of hours and wages recorded by the Office of Equal Opportunity in that time. Now, I'll bring back this chart briefly to show that while each group is impacted, that impact is felt differently by different groups, but it is actually a little bit difficult for us to make good statements based on this pandemic data because it has changed so significantly. It's been a significant impact on the entire market, so it's difficult for OEO to make profound statements on the impact to any particular group, but we are tracking that data very carefully and doing everything that we can to make sure that we're doing what we can to improve it across the board. And that's essentially what I'm saying here. We recorded significantly less work on city contracts in hours and wages that applied to both our development and our public improvement contracts. And we are still collecting data and processing that data, but the significant reduction of work, hours, wages, everything else makes it difficult for us to make, and again, grand pronouncements on what's going on, because it's really such a different number than what we were seeing in 17, 18, and 19. But it certainly has had a negative impact on our African American and Hispanic workers over the past 2 years. When it comes to outreach, OEO engages with contractors and developers and expresses a need for a representative workforce. Again, while we have no formal obligations on the use of minority and female workers on our projects, we do work hard on our relationships with our contractors and express the need to have a representative workforce on our projects. Again, it's not a formal obligation on these contracts, but we do work on the relationship with those contractors and express to them the need, obviously, to use Cleveland residents on our projects, but to use our minority and female workforce on those projects where available, and that's a strong thing that we do. We do conduct site visits on site. Obviously, those have been down significantly over the past 2 years, as well as we are maintaining the safety of my staff, as well as there just being fewer projects out there to go look at, but that is going to ramp up as we move past the pandemic. We do send meeting notices to our certified MBFB and CSB firms when we are aware of large-scale development and try to keep them in the loop as best we can. And we work with our partners agencies as well to make sure we're sharing that information so that contractors are aware of opportunities that exist. And we also will guide our contractors and potential candidates to Ohio Means Jobs. So Ohio Means Jobs is the cooperative local agency between the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, putting workers together with employers and processing that. We have a good relationship with Ohio Means Jobs, and they do great work over there. But that is our first touch point between our contractors and potential employees to put them together and try to make sure that we have a good workforce out there. When we speak to emerging trends, the Cleveland market is in the middle of the largest continuous development phase in a generation. There are a lot of large development projects that we're seeing in and around the city. Both public and private entities are committed to using minority, female, and small businesses on those projects in a way that we're very happy to see in terms of the commitment. And there is a growing need for our certified minority, female, and contractors, as well as construction workers on these contracts. These projects are making very strong commitments to engaging our certified business community. The concern is making sure that there are enough of those businesses and that they are strong enough to be able to participate on these contracts and help these projects meet the goals that they have set for themselves. And that's essentially the first point of my potential barriers here, is there may not be currently enough MBE and FBE firms to meet the needs of the large number of projects that we're looking at. And that doesn't mean that we can't grow those businesses, but it means that there's a new commitment and a large amount of development that's occurring. We need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that market is strong enough to help those projects be successful while engaging our minority and female contractor base. We're also running into issues in terms of local workers to meet the needs of these large projects. Anecdotally, some large projects are casting that net a little bit wider in terms of their local participation from a workforce standpoint. Their concern being able to meet all the needs of the projects with the construction workers currently available in Cleveland and the Northeast Ohio area, and looking to include additional Ohio-based workforce as opposed to just a Northeast Ohio-based workforce. The existing tools to prepare businesses and workers to participate in these projects may not be able to keep up with the demand. What I mean by that is essentially we have a number of different partners that work hard to prepare businesses to engage in these types of projects. And those are very good projects. But they were established in a market that needed, I don't want to say fewer minority and female firms to meet the goals, but there are more projects that are currently being engaged in this area than there were in the past. And so having the tools to help those businesses grow and be prepared to work in those projects is a fundamental thing that we need to do. And finally, the general market, the labor market, is experiencing unprecedented volatility. It's very difficult for everybody to staff work sites and generally be able to make sure that you have a sufficient number of employees to do the work that you'd like to do. And that's not just being experienced by the construction market, but obviously across the board. But that is something that all parties need to work towards in terms of finding ways to ensure that there are enough local trained workers to meet the needs of these industries. And finally, speaking of OEO's development plans, what our goals are in the near future, OEO is excellent at our certification and compliance management components of our office. We do that very, very well. Our weakness is in our development capacity. We don't have as much development capacity as I think would be useful in this setting. At some place that we need to grow and want to grow. We're very good at doing the things that we do, but we need to find ways to assist contractors in being ready, willing, and able to work on these larger projects and be able to be engaged in those projects. We do intend to add business development staff to be able to better direct those businesses, help them grow into those roles. We will continue to enforce contract participation goals and ensure subcontractors are participating in contracts as promised. So that's a key component to what we do. I won't say it's different than what other organizations do, but we are at the very forefront of data collection and compliance management in this industry. Essentially, we collect more data on not just what a contractor is committed to, but what they've actually done in terms of who did you use on the contract, were they paid as anticipated, what was the plan to use those contractors. And then finally, OEO will need to perform a disparity study to ensure the stability of our MB and FBE programming. In order to have programming that is sort of focused on ethnicity and gender guidelines, you do need to have data to support those actions. And we do that through a disparity study. And the City of Cleveland has run disparity studies in the past. Our current disparity study is running about 10 years right now. And so having new data will support the program. Having new data may allow OEO to engage in new types of programming, operating in different types of industries and growing the program, but it's a fundamental requirement of these types of programs. And so that is also on OEO's imminent list, is making sure that we have a disparity study to gather more information. As I have sort of indicated, we've been collecting better data definitely over the last 10 years, so we have more tools, more data at our disposal to support that study, but it is a necessary thing that we're going to need to do. And that is the end of my presentation, so I am welcome to take any questions. I welcome any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Director. A lot of great information. So before I turn it over to my colleagues, just a comment and just a few questions. So, there's been a lot of discussion about building equity within our city, and there's no doubt, and my colleagues probably would agree, that the Office of Opportunity is vital in achieving this goal. So just a few questions, and I know that we met prior to this meeting, but I would like my colleagues to know, do you have to speak English to apply to be a vendor or even a contractor with the city?
No, ma'am, you do not need to speak English to apply. We do not currently have any Spanish-speaking certification staff on staff. Mm-hmm. We do have resources to provide interpreters for businesses that may be applying, mm-hmm. but in terms of direct staff in my staff that is Spanish-speaking from a certification standpoint, we don't currently have that. Like I said, we have tools to help us deal with that, but it is a weakness in the office.
Good. And so, Director, now that and I'm sure you've analyzed the data, and once again, trying to improve equity within our city, is this something that you will be working towards in this upcoming budget hearing year for the future? And I'm not only talking about in terms of, Latinos. I'm talking about just non-English vendors and businesses that are out in the city of Cleveland.
Yes, ma'am. Our goal is to make sure that we can certify anybody who might be eligible to do so. Mm-hmm. So if language barriers are an obstacle, and I can understand how they would be, it's obviously our goal to resolve those barriers as best we can, mm-hmm. because we really do need and want to reach out to businesses that can be certified by our office that aren't currently certified. Mm-hmm. We need to grow that certification base. And if one of those barriers is a language barrier, then we need to resolve that immediately.
How many staff members do you have in the Office of Opportunity?
So we currently have 8 staff members, and we are, again, looking to expand that by a few people, mostly in the development side. But yeah, we currently have 8 staff members in my office.
Is that sufficient?
So I would say that staffing is sufficient for our current mission, which again is mostly a certification and contract compliance mission. We're doing that well. If we're going to successfully expand that mission to include a more direct, active business development component, we will need additional staff to successfully do that.
Got it. Okay. So one of the things I've learned of just having a ward office is that many of our constituents go to council office, or we're that go-to person for anything that takes place in the city, for city services. And so I'm curious to know, in your planning for 2022, would it be helpful to have someone out there, community outreach worker, that is helping link business owners and potential vendors to the Office of Opportunity, and can we hire someone that's bilingual to help with that? Maybe station in one of our chambers in the city of Cleveland or so forth. So I just wanted to put that out there. It was, I did reach out to some of our chambers, and one of the things that they, struggled with is linking vendors to the city of Cleveland and how complex the application is, and the application is not available in other languages. So it's just difficult, and there's a lot of businesses that would love the opportunity to work with the city of Cleveland and be a vendor. So just, please work with your council members. Please let us know how we could help, because I think ultimately we all want to link our businesses to opportunities that exist in the city of Cleveland. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, and I'm going to allow my vice chair to go first on her line of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, good afternoon, Director. Just a couple of follow-ups, I guess, as we understand things that are in the law that says this is a goal and judicial system said not really. I guess, has there been, what are the opportunities that we can explore other ways to incentivize companies to do right? I have a philosophy, if I have to convince somebody in 2022 to diversify your workforce and the systems, do your contractors, you ideally is not a person I really want to have that conversation with. So are there some creative ways we can do outside of legislation that can create a more encouraging atmosphere in the city of Cleveland and in the developing space?
Well, I think that it's a necessary shift because, as you said, that the Supreme Court has restricted some of the traditional tools that we have used. And unfortunately, as we've seen with the data, there's been a significant negative effect from that decision. But it also means that something we may have taken for granted in the past in terms of this utilization of local residents and the impact that it has are no longer available to us. And so it does require us to be both more creative in that process, but also holding our partners, our partner contractors, our partner developers as accountable as we can, if not from a strict ordinance standpoint or from a potential penalty standpoint, but rather from a community building standpoint to say this is a vital component of the work that we do. Obviously, we're still collecting that data, which is a really good starting point because it allows us to show exactly sort of where we're at and can give us the grounds from which to work. Essentially, there can be some sentiment that these contractors are doing fine or that they're still being mostly successful. And I think that by showing the data that is showing the impact, we can show sort of where the weaknesses are and what we're expecting those contractors do to resolve those weaknesses. So we are significantly hamstrung in our ability to have programming for Cleveland residents in particular. We are a little bit hamstrung in our ability to apply formal rules when it comes to the use of minority and female workers on our project, but there are ways that we can impact that in ways that we maybe haven't done in the past. But we need to operate within the restrictions that the Supreme Court has given us, but also there are creative ways for us to be more aggressive than we have been in the past.
Okay. Follow up? No. Okay, thank you. Through the chair, to the director, a question in regard to the disparity report itself. You indicated that it's been about 10 years that the city has engaged in a disparity report. So I guess it's a two-part question. The first, where could someone find the disparity report that was originally done? I don't know if it's on the online platform. And can you just highlight some of the things that were identified in that disparity report? And then the second part is, ideally, how often should a community engage in doing the disparity report?
So the disparity study is available on the Office of Opportunities website. I'll make sure that all those links are still active and are still working, even though the data itself is again getting a little bit older. The past study indicated, and it's where we still have our minority and female goals on projects is that where the city of Cleveland's contracting was really not doing a very good job when it came to minority and female contracting is in our building projects. And when I separate that, I'm saying the difference between our actual buildings and structures versus the utilities and streetscape work that we do. So when we were looking at past disparities, that's where we were seeing it. Essentially, that the city's commitment and utilization of our minority and female businesses was at its weakest in those particular fields. The city of Cleveland in general, and this is just the data that we've collected, does quite well when it comes to utilizing minority and female businesses on our contracting. We do very well. Now, one of the drawbacks of that when you do a disparity study is the data doesn't reflect as much of a disparity in city contracting as you might expect. But having operated in this industry and in this region for so long, just because the city of Cleveland is relatively healthy when it comes to utilizing minority and female businesses does not mean the market is. And that's where a disparity study would spend actually a good amount of time, is evaluating the market itself and how minority and female businesses are able to operate within the market as a whole, and how that impacts City of Cleveland contracting directly. And we can talk a lot about what disparity studies may result in, but it's very important, because when you look at the City of Cleveland's numbers in our contracting, I don't want to say the numbers are good, but they're maybe better than you might expect. And they're certainly competitive with any other industry in terms of our utilization of minority and female businesses on our contracting. But that also is impacted by what might be considered a weak minority and female business market, especially a minority female business market in this region. And when you're studying this data, part of the analysis is, well, how many businesses are out there, right? How many minority businesses are in your market? And then we'll compare it to how many you use in your contracting. Well, if the market is such that it is making things difficult for minority-owned businesses or female-owned businesses, and they're having difficulty with access to capital, with just the history of being in business, that impacts how many there are. And so it impacts how many you can use. And that would be a fundamental component of any disparity study, but would certainly be a major component of a disparity study that we would run, because the market is definitely a better indicator of the struggles of minority-owned businesses in our region than City of Cleveland contracting directly.
This is my last point. Thank you. To do the chair, to the director, I'm glad you kind of shared that. I always would like to highlight the 2015 disparity report that the Ohio Department of Transportation did, and I will say kind of in line when you talked about the contract utilization in the building component of what is actually happening in the market. Specifically, when you look at that disparity report that was done in 2015, it highlighted specifically Black-owned companies, Hispanic-owned companies, and I believe it was Native American-owned companies, where they were underperforming in their capabilities to actually scale up and expand due to, as the report noted it, as passive discrimination, specifically in our financial institutions that are not lending the way they should be to our minority businesses. And one of the issues, I think, coming from that perspective, is that we can do a report, but we do not put in place the things that will repair or remediate the issues that are addressed in the disparity report. And so that's one of the reasons why I actually want to look at the previous disparity report the City of Cleveland did, to actually see the things that were identified then. What did we do to remediate the issues? I don't know that, but this will be a continuing on. But I'm glad that you have shared with us kind of what that process is, and really talking about the larger factors that are in play, specifically as we talk about minority business enterprises and female business enterprises. So thank you so much, Director.
If I could just briefly respond, just one of the good parts about the way that this whole culture has shifted over the past 10 years especially is that it used to be very much strictly a data-focused effort when we're talking about disparity studies and that type of work. And this understanding of the expansion and how it impacts businesses that are beyond just dollars and cents, but in terms of as a cultural issue that impacts the size of these businesses and their capacity, that both programming and the courts have been more receptive to that information and that logic than they were 10 years ago. And so we have seen a shift in the way these programs are run and sort of the appreciation that it's not just dollars and cents spent by the city of Cleveland that is the only metric that you can use for this type of analysis. You can look and should look at the larger market to get a better understanding of the impact of all of this stuff on these businesses.
Thank you, Councilwoman House. Great line of questions. And so next I have Councilman Slife.
Thank you. And first, I want to just begin by congratulating you and Councilmember House on chairing our first meeting of the year. I'm excited to work with all of you, but I'm also excited about the expanded scope of the committee. You know, this has historically been a committee that has a very important public policy angle, but fewer pieces of direct legislation getting referred over to it. So I'm really eager by adding in education workforce. To me, it's really acknowledgement that how interlinked each of these topics are, and if we really want to address issues head on, we kind of have to look at each issue from all these different angles. So I'm excited to work with you and excited to be a pain in your side until you kick me off the committee.
Well, remember, there's more women than men.
I know. I was flying solo until Councilman Starr came in. Through the chair to the director, I'm interested in, could you elaborate more on the goal of this business support? When I had written down in my notes, we have this list of small businesses, minority-owned businesses, female-owned businesses, and it seems like a ripe opportunity to be able to identify who they are, what their needs are, and help them become more competitive and able to compete for those contracts in the private market. So I'm glad that you touched on it, but it's obviously a big issue. So if you could just kind of touch on what your goals are, what your way to operationalize it is, and how we can be supportive.
Sure. Through the chair to the councilman. Essentially, what the Office of Opportunity has successfully done for a very long time is certifying our minority, female, and small businesses. And so in that process, we are vetting that the businesses are indeed in business, that we've looked at their ownership breakdown, we've looked at their annual revenues, we've done a lot of sort of fundamental evaluation of those businesses as part of their certification process. What we have not had the tools to do, as much as I think we can take advantage of, is taking where those businesses are today and growing them from there. What resources do we have or are we aware of that we can connect to those businesses to help them go from being the size they are today to the size they might eventually be tomorrow and from there. So when we do our certification process, it's very much an analysis of the business as it is today. Where I think we would do well is by taking that next step to say, okay, where can this business be tomorrow? What can we do in terms of the resources that we have, but in terms of the resources we're aware of that other organizations locally have that can help that business get somewhere different tomorrow? And that has not been OEO's focus really over my time there. And it's not to say that it's a weakness per se, is we're very good at the certification side now. But with that knowledge, with that foundation that we have, where can we grow from there? So that's really what it is. The focus is on, okay, how do we take that next step to identify where we can assist these businesses beyond just their certification, beyond just engaging them on city contracts, and put them in touch with resources to help them grow.
Thank you, and that's great. And one of my focuses has been in whether it's in this committee or in the development committee and elsewhere. We talk a lot about entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship's great, and we should always be promoting entrepreneurship. But to the degree that we have existing businesses that maybe just need whatever that technical assistance is, or that help to make that investment to get themselves up to the next level and create jobs. there's also a lot of people out there that might not be interested in starting their own business, or quite frankly, starting a business is risky. You're putting a lot on the line, and there's a lot of people, I think, in our neighborhoods who are looking just for an employment opportunity, and they need the stability that an established operation can offer them. So I see a real a secondary benefit to helping these businesses grow, of being able to make these connections of people who are looking for jobs. Kind of with the hat of this new educational focus, we hear routinely that businesses of all sorts, but especially in the trades, are struggling to find people. Any thoughts or advice on as we move forward on educational policy, what this council, knowing that this council does not have direct authority over schools, or we don't own a training center, but what can we be doing on our end to create an ecosystem that is ripe for workforce training, educational opportunities, so that we can get people to the skill set that they need to either start that business or take a job with an established one?
To the councilman, what I would say is that my strength and my background is not especially strong when it comes to workforce. But what I will say is this: the tools that we have had in place for a long time in terms of maintaining that path to employment, to making sure that we have we'll focus on a construction workforce, but any workforce. The pandemic really has changed those, and I think that even as we look to things that we've done in the past in terms of apprenticeship programs, pre-apprenticeship programs, other outreach efforts to try to engage a workforce community and sort of to grow that, those tools may have been successful in the past, but the market's changed dramatically in the last 2 years. And so while I obviously would direct more of that questioning to our Department of Workforce Development, the thing I would say is that, I don't want to say all bets are off, but that the old ways are not, I would not expect them to work as well, because the need is so great, and the atmosphere is so different than it was even just a few years ago, that the need for creative solutions to this and not doing what we've been doing for a while is going to be necessary.
I appreciate that insight, and with kind of to your point of, things could be improved upon. Chapter 187, as you mentioned in your presentation, dictates the ownership of the organization. But I've heard many people say, I drove by the construction site and I was told that it was a female-owned business, but Councilwoman Spencer here owns a business, but all the workers look like me, and it was just kind of this confusion about how is that. I thought we had a system in place, and as you mentioned, we are no longer in our own public projects able to enforce Cleveland resident hiring, and then Chapter 187 speaks more to the ownership of the firm and not necessarily to the employment of the firm. So really, the hard work is making sure that where we are getting, women, minorities, the skill sets necessary to, compete for those jobs and maybe start that business one day. But it's not. An OEO is a great office, but it's not the answer to the totality of the need, right? And I'll just end it by, this is kind of more of a soapbox, but it's just incredibly disappointing that with the Ohio Supreme Court, in my opinion, once again undercutting our ability to work on behalf of our residents and our community. And I'm sure Councilwoman House can speak more about this. I won't put words in her mouth, but it just seems that Ohio government, it's not necessarily that they have an indifference towards the city of Cleveland. It's almost like they have an outright contempt to us trying to elevate our residents, to having programs in place that are going to ensure that public tax dollars actually result in employment opportunities for Clevelanders, people of color, people that are living in poverty, and it's just a very frustrating situation that we're in. I guess my question out of it is there any auditing, whether it's through prevailing wage or so some other mechanism that we're able to kind of determine as the percentage of Clevelanders employed on these public projects has decreased, where these workers are now coming from, like zip code level. Are they coming from elsewhere in Northeast Ohio? Are contractors bringing in workers from out of state, which is incredibly common? It'd be really interesting to get a grasp of who's benefiting, knowing that it's not our residents.
To the councilman, we do collect that data. I don't have that report for you today, but essentially we are collecting all of that certified payroll data, which does include the addresses of the employees that are working. And we could do some charting to show you where those employees are coming from. Obviously a vast majority of our construction workers are local, but you are correct that there are, I won't say it's more and more, but there are some contractors that are bringing in people from far away, potentially from out of state, that may be impacting our construction market. But I can run some data and get you at least a general understanding of where that's coming from. But yeah, the number, especially on our public improvement contracts, the number of residents being so much lower as a percentage means they have to be coming from somewhere, and the answer is they're just coming from right outside the city.
Thank you, and Madam Chair, I get on soapboxes a lot, but my final soapbox moment is just a reminder to our colleagues, when we have these larger development projects that get funded through economic development or elsewhere, it's often controversial that the city puts in, whether it's a loan or a TIF or some other financial mechanism, and that's a whole nother conversation for a different day, but arguably the benefit of us doing that for these development projects is it triggers these requirements that ensures that these large development projects we see downtown, University Circle, aren't bringing workers in from beyond the region, that it's employing workers locally, and there is that easier line from the insertion of our dollars and the ability for workers in our community to get that income, spend it in our community, and us able to cycle that dollar through Cleveland instead of sending it back to the Carolinas or California or wherever. So that's, we haven't talked about that as much on the development side, but I've always thought that it's an underappreciated angle to the benefit that we can have as a council when it comes to large development projects. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Slife. And next, I have Councilwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to echo Councilman Slife's congratulations to our new chairwoman and our new vice chairwoman of this committee. I'm very excited to be part of this committee under your leadership. Looking forward to a great body of work together. Thank you for scheduling today's hearing and getting us starting off the year with this important information that will really set the tone for what we want to do going forward. Through the chairwoman to the interim director, it's so nice to meet you. We haven't met before. I do have a few questions, but before I launch into those, just curious, just briefly, your personal story and what brought you to this work. How did you get to the office of OEO? Just curious how you get into that work.
To the councilwoman, I won't pretend like it was a plan. I applied to work with the city of Cleveland in 2006 and was hired in 2007. I am from Barberton originally. I went to undergrad at John Carroll University. I went to law school at Northwestern in Chicago and came back looking for work. The Office of Equal Opportunity offered me a job. It's worked out really well for me in terms of my ability to work on any number of different contractual elements. Our Cleveland Area Business Code was changed significantly in 2008, so I was able to work significantly on addressing that and helping strengthen that program. And I've been able to successfully manage the contract compliance for the Office of Equal Opportunity, and have, I guess, just been in the right place at the right time so far. So it's gone well. But this work is fantastic. The work that we've been able to do and the opportunities that we've been able to create can always do more, always want to do more. But we're able to do so much with the data we collect and show actual outcomes in a way that is incredibly meaningful. And I don't have the numbers here in front of me, but essentially we run approximately 30% of our actual dollars spent, our addressable spend, to our minority and female firms. That number is significantly higher than a number of other organizations, private and public. They're doing the same type of work. Now, that's not to pat ourselves on the back, but it's to say that we're actively able to provide opportunities to minority and female businesses in a meaningful way, in real dollars, that despite the commitment of other organizations, we're showing real results. And like I said, we need to do better. We can do better. We're going to continue to work to grow businesses and bring more people into that circle. But it is very rewarding to be able to look at tangible impacts of this programming. And all of the, like I said, the MBE and FBE programming has been here for 45 years. We can do a lot better than that. But to have a culture that has embraced the need for programming for minority and female businesses is a key component to what the City of Cleveland's been doing for 45 years. I'm very happy to have been part of that, and I hope that, again, we can just make that number improve over time.
Thanks. It's nice to get to know you better. Thank you. I think even though your presentation, through the chairwoman, your presentation was comprehensive, I feel like I need to ask a couple more OEO fundamentals. So one of those, I kind of need to wrap my mind around a couple more of these fundamentals. One is it a mistake to interpret that most of, so there are 556 businesses that are certified MBE, FBE, or CSB. What sectors are they in? It seems like much of the conversation is revolved around construction projects, so I just want to make sure I understand a high-level sector breakdown and what kinds of contracts, aside from construction-based or development-based, are we talking about?
To the Councilwoman, we certify in any category that a business may want to be certified in. So while we typically rely on public procurement standards, we'll certify anybody that can show that they're in business and then verify their ownership. So we have flower companies, we have engineers, we have construction contractors, we have suppliers, we have trucking contractors. We really do run the gamut. Now, I will say that our certification and definitely our compliance component is going to be focused on what the City of Cleveland buys. So it is going to be, a lot of the dollars are going to be spent in a construction side. The opportunities on some of the other types of procurement can be limited. We work hard to expand those opportunities. We have worked hard to break up some larger contracts to make them more manageable for some of our smaller certified contractors. But it's difficult to say exactly so the way that those businesses break down. I can do a little bit of analysis for you to get some of that. A vast majority of our certified firms are in areas that the city contracts because that's where the value is in the certification. So if I'm reaching out to a vendor who may be minority or female owned, one of the first questions if I'm encouraging them to get certified is, okay, but why, right? And if the City of Cleveland doesn't buy whatever it is that that vendor provides, then the value may be limited. Now, what I would say to that vendor is essentially, we may not buy it, but somebody else may. And if we have good partnerships, and we do, with other local entities, including the hospital systems, our private partners, and even our sports teams, where that certification may be valuable to a different entity that isn't us. I mean, we only buy so many things, and we're very careful with the money that we spend, and that impacts what we can do in terms of all certified businesses. But our certification does carry, and so if you are a vendor who isn't selling to us, but may be selling to one of our partner organizations, then it may have value for you.
Thanks. And as a follow-up to that, through the chairwoman, I think it would be of interest to have just an understanding of a breakdown of the sector. So again, of those 556 businesses, just curious to know what types of contracts are they getting?
Sure.
What that would just be of interest to have a better handle on that, and perhaps which sectors are better represented and others are not. So whether Just, it would be very curious to learn more about that. I'm also interested in this idea, and Councilman Slife referenced it a little bit, which is, so in terms of a metric, through the chairwoman, a metric, we're talking about business certification, but then we're also talking about worker hours. So you've presented both. We have a certain number of MBE, FBE, CSB, but then we're really looking at the actual workers. And what I'm wanting to know, which Councilman Slife referenced, is sometimes you can have an FBE, but then, so it's a female-owned business, but then the workers look like my colleague Charlie, good-looking guy, but you know what I'm saying? So when we're looking at the actual worker hours, the worker participation, is it the actual demographic of that worker that's able to be captured? So it's not just if you work for an MBE, then you're a minority worker, or FBE, or a female. I want to just make sure I really understand the worker metric versus the business metric.
Yes, ma'am. So just to clarify, this chart here with demographic utilization, these are boots on the ground. These are actual workers and the hours performed by those workers. And we collect
as part of their certified firms?
No, this is strictly, like I said, these are the actual workers. This is the demographic data of the actual workers. This is not referencing the contractor that these workers work for at all. This individual worker has been identified as African American. Here's how much money. Here's the hours they worked that year. Here's the wages that they earned that year, and that's slide 15 if that helps you out at all. But that is strictly actual workers, actual hours on site, verified through a certified payroll report.
And these are City of Cleveland contracts? These are individuals who are employed by vendors that the city contracts with, or who are we looking at here?
To the councilwoman, this is actual construction worker hours.
Construction workers.
Construction work. This is construction worker hours. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Performed on city invested contracts. So this includes both our development contracts and our public improvement contracts. So this is both projects that are on property we own, the City of Cleveland owns, and then on projects that are privately owned but have city investment in them. So if we have provided a loan, some tax incentive financing, any other sort of city financial contribution greater than $100,000, it's going to be part of this chart.
So is it fair to say that a major focus of OEO is construction, the construction sector? That goes back to my original question of what sectors are we really tracking? And if this, I would just say that's an important nuance for the slide 15 is those are construction workers specifically.
To the councilwoman, yes, we can clarify that as part of this, but to sort of recenter the conversation. So this presentation is focused on a workforce component and the data that we collect on workforce elements, but that data is going to be directly related to construction. That's the field that we have that information because we have the boots on the ground. We have the documentation of those employees and the work that they are performing on these City of Cleveland contracts. That is correct. Those are the hours that we collect. When it comes to a certification component, and we're talking about businesses, not workers, that's where we get the wider variety of industries that those contractors may be certified to do. But in terms of actually tracking work performed by contractors on city contracts, it's going to be construction.
Okay. I think I'm almost there. Okay. So to make sure I understand, when it comes to individual worker demographics, who's getting paid, who's getting the hours, we only track individuals through construction projects. And those are either City of Cleveland projects and or private projects that receive public funding, city funding. Separately, we track vendors who get contracts that are either MBE, FBE, or CSB, but we don't necessarily know the breakdown of their workers. Is that an accurate statement?
To the council.
I'm just making sure I get it.
No, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, that's interesting to know. So and it's interesting because on the construction worker side, the city's hands are fairly tied with no longer being able to enforce the Fannie Lewis law for City of Cleveland owned projects. So that's an interesting one there. Less impact than we might have had, certainly. So on the part about construction projects, this has to do with, just through the chairwoman wanting to clarify, would this be any private project that, to Councilman Sleif's point too, that gets a TIF, tax abatement, or what constitutes city dollars being in a construction project in terms of what would fall under the purview of OEO?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, essentially yes. Any city contribution, which may include TIF, may include a loan, may include any money that the city of Cleveland has the authority to control. So it's not even necessarily our money, but it's money that's coming through the city of Cleveland for control. Greater than $100,000 is going to trigger Chapter 188, the Cleveland resident requirement. So any part of that funding or any combination of multiple funding sources that totals greater than $100,000 is going to have the Cleveland resident requirement applied to it.
Thank you for that clarification. And then I think my last question then on this line is community benefits agreements. So through the chairwoman, I know the city, I don't actually have great familiarity with which the city, to the degree to which the city does enter into community benefits agreements. I would like to know a little more if we do enter into them, who negotiates them, and then does OEO enforce them?
To the councilwoman, to give some general background on how the city of Cleveland typically operates with community benefits agreements is that, well, let me put it this way. The Chapter 188 obligations automatically apply as a contract term on anything greater than $100,000. So the 20% resident requirement, the 4% low income requirement are going to apply anytime the city of Cleveland invests more than $100,000. Community benefits agreements are typically added on top of that. So essentially they may include a resident or other commitment. They often include other community investment on the project, whether it's a number of new jobs that need to be created, though that can often be tied directly to funding sources. It may be, again, apprenticeship programs, pre-apprenticeship programs, other types of programming that, again, are for community benefit. Those are typically negotiated by the Department of Economic Development as terms of the agreement. But I guess I want to just clarify in that the Department of Economic Development doesn't have the ability to move those down, essentially. They're locked in immediately at the $100,000 number, that 20% residency requirement. So while that may be included as part of a community benefits package, it couldn't be removed from a community benefits package. So yeah, we apply that Chapter 188 obligation, that 20% obligation, to any and all contracts, even if they don't have a separately negotiated community benefits agreement.
That's helpful. So just one example to clarify this for me. In Ward 15, as an example, I have a townhouse. This is just one of the many that are being built for $700,000. So clearly, it's a tax abated townhome. I'm not sure if it has any other public dollars in it other than tax abatement. Do we know whether a $700,000 tax abated townhome would trigger OEO, does that meet the threshold? And would I therefore be able to expect 20% resident participation and 4% low income resident participation?
To the councilwoman, I would need to investigate the project to get better information on that. What I would say is that the actual city contribution does need to be greater than $100,000.
The city contribution.
So yes, I'm sorry, just to clarify,
Yeah.
the city's financial contribution would need to be greater than $100,000. Based on the scenario that you presented, I would say it's probably unlikely that it reaches that threshold, but I don't know.
I would be very interested to know for
Sure.
tax abatements specifically how the city's contribution is calculated, because that's an interesting one, because we're the authority, we can authorize it, but we don't actually, it's not our tax revenues. I think I want to hear more about, not for today, but just putting a pin in. I would like to learn more about abatement specifically as an incentive that the city offers, and whether it's possible for it to trigger any of these workforce requirements.
To the Councilwoman, yes. And all I can say is that the Department of Economic Development is aggressive in applying the OEO obligations where it can. So if it meets that threshold, or even could meet that threshold, then they are going to attempt to apply the OEO obligations, including the 188 obligation. They, meaning Department of Economic Development, has done the math. So they can calculate the value of abatement, increment financing, or any other element that is being controlled by the city's contribution. Where they are not applying it, it is very, very, very likely to be the result of the scope of the city's investment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Spencer. And just a follow-up on her line of question. So when I was first elected, I heard a lot about the community benefits agreement. So essentially, if there's investment happening in the neighborhood, there's a community benefits agreement that is negotiated, who is following up to ensure that that community agreement, benefits agreement, is taking place?
To the Councilwoman, OEO is going to monitor the use of Cleveland residents and low-income workers and MBFB, CSB commitments on those projects as part of the same monitoring we do on any other project. So we're monitoring all of what I'd call the standard OEO community benefits components are all going to be monitored by OEO, like I said, as we would on any other contract. In terms of other community benefits that are above and beyond the OEO obligations, those are contract terms established by the Department of Economic Development. They will be the ones monitoring those additional community benefits.
And our community benefits agreement, is that legislated, or is that just a piece of, application or agreement contract that is signed by two parties?
So the general framework of community benefits commitments are basically just commitments by partners who have agreed to enter into those types of arrangements. The contract terms of a particular community benefits agreement applied to a city investment are contract terms. They're essentially not legislative, separate from any other legislation that may be necessary to apply them, but they are actual contract terms as part of the agreement between the city of Cleveland and its developer, whoever the contract holder may be.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, Director. So next I have Councilwoman Gray.
Yes, hi. Thank you.
Microphone.
Thank you, and I want to echo Slyke and Spencer. I'm not going to repeat everything that they said, but congratulations to Chair Santana and our Vice Chair House. And I think this is going to be a great team that we're going to be working with moving forward.
We're going to be the best committee.
Okay. Yes,
You're not going to
best
want to
committee.
miss one.
Okay. Best committee. All right. Thank you for correcting me. But I have a couple questions. With this Fannie Lewis, the Fannie Lewis Cleveland Resident Employment Law passed in 2003, have that been looked at to upgrade? Because this is 2022. Pertaining to the status quo, saying that the Supreme Court, the higher Supreme Court, ruled that Fannie Lewis law was a conflict with the state of Ohio law that prohibited local employment performance preference on public improvements, and that the city of the Cleveland could not enforce it. But I know to say the city of Cleveland continues to enforce the Cleveland resident requirement on the development projects. But could that be looked at to, look at it to enforce it per se for a higher percentage of what it was recommended back in 2003? If this is the right question for you.
To the Councilwoman, the short answer is there have been minor changes to the Fannie Lewis law over the past time that it's been in effect. There have not been any changes since 2019, since the Supreme Court's decision. And we still collect the same data we were collecting before. So we haven't changed our reporting obligations. We haven't changed any of the other provisions of Chapter 188. The only thing that we've had to change is our enforceability, our ability to penalize a contractor for not meeting the obligation. So there have not been any changes since 2019. The state of Ohio law and the conflict there is directly related to that term public improvement. And not taking into account an opinion on whether the Supreme Court made that correct decision or not. One of the reasons that there hasn't been a significant change is because we are still collecting a lot of data. We are still tracking the use of Cleveland residents on our projects, and we are still collecting a lot of that information on the development contract. So we're doing approximately 5 times as many hours or on our construction worker hours are being recorded on private projects versus public projects. So we're still doing a lot of work. We're still collecting a lot of data. It's very frustrating to not have that enforcement mechanism for the City of Cleveland public improvement contracts. There may be ways that we can, to improve that number, not resorting to, to a penalty process, but something else we might be able to do. But no, there has not been a change since then. The 20% number has been a successful number for us in the past in terms of being able to maintain compliance while not necessarily creating significant challenges. But at the same time, that number, as you said, that number is from 2003, starting executed in 2004. So there may be an opportunity to adjust that in some meaningful way, or at least take it into consideration. But it has not changed since 2003.
Okay, well, maybe there's something we can look into. But I do have another question. Going back to the data that shows outreach efforts, efforts. It says here that you have something that Spencer looked at. My additional question is to that says that the OEL guides contractors to Ohio Means Jobs to identify potential candidates. Is there any data on that shows that Ohio Means Jobs hire? What specific ethnic groups they hire for these contracts through the Ohio Means Jobs? Do you have any data on that?
To the councilwoman, I don't. The Department of Workforce Development and Ohio Means Jobs have just incredible amounts of data in terms of their outreach efforts, who they've engaged in the community, the demographic breakdown of that community. But what I do not have for you, and I would have to work through them, and in full transparency to say I don't know how well we have that data in terms of Ohio Means Jobs applicants then working on City of Cleveland contracts. I don't have that data. But Ohio Means Jobs does a fantastic job of connecting employees to employers, and that's their focus. They are about accepting potential employees. They are about identifying weaknesses. When I say weaknesses, I mean ways that those employees can be better prepared to enter into the workforce. And so they work with those employees and get them additional training.
Yes.
They set up interviews, things like that, as a partner with employees, employers, and everybody else involved. So they do a significant amount of very good work in terms of trying to grow the Cleveland workforce. But in terms of the actual data, in terms of those applicants then working on City of Cleveland projects, I don't have that data for you right now. And it's something we could look into.
Okay, if you look into it, I would like to see where they hire the minorities applicants from and what area per se, because that will help us to understand how applicants coming from the low-income area of the City of Cleveland, how they are being hired into these jobs per se. And one last question is, I know in the future, we have a couple apprenticeship programs that's going to be built and implemented in our community. And I would assume that those organizations will be contacting your workforce to make sure that a lot of the students will be hired under this program. So just moving forward, that's something to look into as well.
No, to the Councilwoman, it's an absolutely necessary component. It's been a challenge that a lot of people have been working on for a long time, but essentially ensuring that we have that construction workforce that can take over as the construction workforce gets older, as they retire. We need more people into that programming, and again, it's a fundamental component to maintaining a strong enough market to be successful. So absolutely, we'll do everything we can to get you both information and data in regards to the use of new apprentices, especially on our projects.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gray. And then last but not least, Councilman Starr.
Hey, how you doing? First, I'd like to echo what most of my colleagues mentioned about our committee, our chair and our vice chair. I already know what y'all about, and I'm looking forward to serving, learning, working side by side, as well as helping you on this committee on whatever we need. Something that I definitely want to, from the chair to the director, will be asking was, as I'm looking at a lot of these different things that you have in the PowerPoint, I think it's very a good overview with a lot of different information. And as I was listening to my colleagues, I started digging deeper into the presentation, and I'm just wondering, what's the reason for the gap disparity amongst the wages for minority, as well as when I look at like Hispanics, African American, like there's a lot of gap wages within the PowerPoint that shows that minorities are not making that much income within these fields or within these roles. And I think a lot of it shows more so construction. So I'm trying to figure out why. And then from 2017 to 2019, we started to see a decline. And then in 2020, we've seen an increase. But then in 2021, we've seen a real low decrease to like 5%. And we all know that's possibly COVID. But what is our plan for 2022 to increase that so it can be even shoot for more than just that 15% in which we started out in 2017?
To the councilman, the data that you're referencing, and you're correct in terms of the trends that we're seeing and in terms of the utilization of our minority workforce on our construction contracts. What we have in front of us is the raw data, right? It's what we've actually collected, which is really valuable and lets us make some guesses on what is actually occurring. But what you're seeing is accurate in terms of when we're looking at for lack of a better term, the wages per hour in our minority workforce, it is lower than in our non-minority workforce. And I'm confident that that's the result of a number of factors, but it's a real thing, and it's significant, and it's something that we need to do some additional work in trying to figure out exactly where that's coming from. Again, it could be anything from the different labor unions that these individuals may belong to, where they are most comfortable or not comfortable, where they are being hired or not being hired, and the wage rates that are assigned to those particular trade unions or type of work that's being performed. I don't have that data directly in front of me right now. But one of the nice things about all of the data that we've collected is that with some time and some tools, we're able to at least get some better information on that. So I won't make a guess, but essentially what I would imagine that a lot of this disparity is coming down to is the craft, the classification that our workers find themselves in. And I think that you are more likely, and I will have data to help clarify this, you're more likely to see our minority workforce working in your standard labor classification versus more skilled classifications that typically have a higher wage rate. But I'll be able to get that information for you based on the data that we've collected. But the next step off of that is obviously the complicated one, right? It's not what category are these workers finding themselves in? It's probably why are they not finding themselves in other categories? What are the obstacles to other potential classifications and other types of work in the construction field that we need to work to overcome, or at least start to overcome, to get more minority construction workers in better paying trades and classifications. So again, that's not a perfect answer to the question you're asking, and I don't have the absolute answer in terms of why, as a percentage, we're seeing again basically the per hour rate of our minority workforce in construction field is lower than our non-minority rate. But we can do some work with the data and at least give us some better information. But I do think at its core, especially when we're talking about construction, a lot of it's the type of work. And the reality is that as a group, our minority construction workforce is more likely to not be in those highest paying trades.
Thank you. Chair, to the director, also, because when I look at it, I see Ohio Means Job, like Councilwoman Gray mentioned, but I look up and see that right now for Ohio Means Jobs, as of yesterday, there's about 234,000 jobs that's open, and then there's about 138,000 jobs that salary starts 50,000 or above. And then you look at that gap, and we look at our city, and we look at the the unemployment. This may be to the chairwoman. I made a note possibly for us to contact or get an overview of Youth Opportunity Unlimited, because with youth development and the education and the training, I know February 1st their portal opens up for their up-and-coming this summer 2022 for employment. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to look at their model that they have and what they're hiring for, and possibly start thinking about the trade initiative so we can fill some of these gaps. Because, when I look at that data and I see that not that many people making that much wages or livable wages, if you ask me, and they look like me, myself, that's a problem, and that may make people be shy away from applying, or they may just not know that these jobs are available and that they are qualified. So I'm thinking more so the marketing, the targeted groups, how can we set a pipeline initiative, therefore we can be able to stop having these, these good jobs that someone can work and probably have a skill set, but they just don't either know or they just don't have the skills yet that we can possibly put into place to help them get to that goal of getting a good paying job so they can be able to live obviously in their city and go through there. Yeah, that's all.
Ann, could you add that to the list? Okay. Is that it?
Oh, no, that's all. Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Starr. And although historically workforce has not worked on any legislation, I just want my colleagues to know that presentations are great. We find out, what are the challenges and made aware of the resources that are available, but I want to make sure that we're following up and just improving any challenges that we've identified through this committee. So just as a follow-up, I have just working with OEO, making sure that it's more accessible for minority businesses. Councilwoman Spencer asked for a breakdown of businesses, was it, or different?
The sector, yeah.
The different sectors?
Those who are certified through OEO, what are the sector, what sectors are we talking about?
Okay. And do you have that down? And then Councilwoman Howes asked for the city study. Is there a specific name for that?
We already said, he said it's on the website.
Got it. But if you could email it to us.
Of course.
Is that, yeah, through the chair. Okay. Okay, I think, any other questions from my colleagues? Any follow-up?
Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you, Ann, for coordinating speaker, and Kim, as always, and my colleagues for being here. And this meeting is adjourned.